Well, because my last video on a similar subject was very popular, I thought I'd do a video on surviving nuclear war, which isn't a very high probability that you would survive it, but how could you survive it? Well, firstly, I'd say if you're in a major urban city that's a target of a nuclear bomb, you're screwed. There's no way you're going to get around that, really. If you look at the power of modern hydrogen bombs, even some of the atom bombs, if you're at the epicentre of where it goes off, you're just, going to be wiped out. So there's no surviving despite what propaganda from governments may tell you. If you're in a big city and that city is struck, then you're doomed. However, you're at least lucky enough that you die quickly, pretty much instantly when you're vaporised and turned into a shadow by the blast. The people who aren't so lucky are the people in the immediate outside areas who have to suffer from all the radiation sickness and looting, and then maybe shooting from police and soldiers afterwards. So what I've got for you is a couple of informational booklets that I've been reading to do this video. I've also been watching Threads from 1984 and The War Game, which was made in Britain about 1965, I believe. And that second one, The War Game, was considered so shocking they banned it from the public seeing it for about 20 years until Threads came out, because Threads is a sort of remake of it. Both are very good and quite disturbing, so if you haven't seen those, I'd really recommend it, because you're probably in for quite a shock when you realise just how nasty the government and everything might be if you survive the initial blasts. So what we're going to have a look at is what can you do to survive if you're outside of an immediate blast area. So your best odds really are if you're in the countryside somewhere that's really far away from everything, because there's hopefully no major targets near you, so you won't have any nukes in your vicinity. And that hopefully means you're the furthest away from gamma radiation as possible. Now, the problem with radiation, when a nuclear bomb goes off, you have something called fallout, which I'm sure you've all heard of. And fallout is mostly alpha radiation. It's where dust and dirt and smoke gets sucked into the bomb and then re-released, and that's all irradiated. So it gives off alpha radiation. Now, it will come down as dust and being blown around by the wind, dust and soot, things like that. And it's incredibly dangerous because if you inhale it, you get cancer very quickly. If you ingest it, you get cancers very quickly, or radiation sickness. And there's not going to be really any medical things to treat you after the bomb has gone off. So this is obviously a full-scale war. If a rogue state like North Korea somehow managed to drop one bomb somewhere, as long as you're not where that bomb is, you should be alright. Because US retaliation for that would be total extermination of North Korea, for example, and you'd be absolutely fine as long as you weren't in those areas, because there's enough, actual infrastructure left to cope with one or two bombs going off somewhere in a major country like the United States. What we're talking about here, really surviving, is full-scale nuclear Armageddon, where, like if you imagine a Cold War, like in the 1980s, Able Archer, both sides pointing their nuclear weapons at each other, full-on exchange, cities, urban areas, heavy industry areas, military bases, airfields all being targeted, meaning that there's very little space around them that's safe. So as I said, if you live in the countryside, your odds have almost massively gone up, because you're not going to be in that initial bomb area. But there's still lots of risks. Now, they're going to come in two forms, well, three forms really. One, radiation fallout that could be blown towards where you are. Number two, looters, people who are after food, water, things like that, because they haven't prepared themselves. And three, the government, when they decide they want to get whatever government is left, decides that they want to get either workers for growing food, or you have supplies and they want them. So basically, what I've shown you these before, but I've got this. This is Wiltshire Council's War Emergency Guidebook. The majority of this would have been classified until recently. Some of it might still be classified. It's why I'm a bit, do I really show you what's in here? What I love is it starts off with all the nuclear warfare booklets saying how might you survive, nuclear war, and then it goes into the actual official government document saying we're screwed. And then it's an entire book of how do we establish martial law and shoot people who don't want to agree with the government. So there's that. And I think this was from the Works in the UK a while ago. It's a big book on nuclear war, lots of pictures, there's a DVD that comes with it, and lots of the same documents that are in that book are also in this one that you can take out and read. So that's, you know, for what probably costs less than a fiver, that's a really good deal if you're interested in all the sort of policies and megatons and everything else of nuclear war. So, once the fallout happens, what you're going to need to do is put on a gas mask, and I'd also recommend a boiler suit. That's why I've got a boiler suit on in this video. You don't need really a full NBC suit, although that would give you better protection, but the alpha radiation is mostly on dust, so it's only if it gets into a cut, you eat it or inhale it, that it's really going to get into your body and cause problems. You are going to want a gas mask, and I thought because I've been watching Threads and all that, we'll use the S6, quite sinister looking. And it's sort of what the guy's going to be shooting you with when the government decides it doesn't want you anymore. So you obviously need your filter on it. You only really need a particulate filter for radiation, but full-on NBC filters can't hurt. So let's put this on. I've done the straps up I think a bit too tight, so it's actually quite hard to pull the mask over. So there you go. Pressure checked. That's what you probably remember if you've all seen Threads, the guys in the green Mark III NBC suits with the SLRs shooting all the people as they want their food or they've been looting or forcing them to work on the collective farm. So that's what you're sort of starting to expect. But anyway, when alpha radiation hits as fallout, it's mostly dust. You can't inhale that dust if you're wearing a gas mask. Even a lot of workplace respirators for, say, removing asbestos, painted decorator masks are better than nothing at this stage because you're reducing your inhalation rate. Of course, it goes without saying that you would want lots and lots of food stockpiled, mostly canned food because radiation can't get in, and bottled water. As much as tap water isn't really safe, if you were to get a lot of tap water, fill it up in bottles and seal it, at least you've got some water. You know, and actually down there behind the camera we've got a lot of stockpiled bottles of water that haven't been opened and other drinks. Because a lot of people don't realise this, but after a big nuclear catastrophe there's probably not going to be any tap water coming through the taps, and if it is, it's not safe to drink. So you need lots of bottled water handy, because you don't know how long it is until someone comes to rescue you, and do you want them rescuing you? So I'll take the mask off so you can hear me more clearly. But as said, the people who are safest really probably Americans, because they can arm themselves, or maybe people in rural Canada who can also arm themselves. So you want to be as far enough away from everybody that people won't opportunistically loot you very much, because you're far enough away that people will have to travel out to get there. Their cars aren't going to be working after the EMP blast from bombs. And you want to be armed so when people do come trying to kill you to get your stuff, you can kill them back. That's normal prepper logic, but it's very true in the event of a nuclear war where everybody's out for themselves afterwards. Now, your later on threat is the government. Now, I don't know which policies governments will act in which countries, but it's a good bet that when the troopers arrive, they're not necessarily there for your protection. As I said, the official documentation says they are going to force people to do things for the good of the country, whatever that is. And if you see Threads, it's working on a collective farm, you know, and you're shot for looting, shot for very minor offences because they need a draconian government in place. Basically medieval feudalism. You're a serf, they're the lords, soldiers and knights after this catastrophe's happened. So to sum stuff up, you want to be out of the way in the countryside, not near any visible targets for enemy attack, and then hopefully by being, you know, in a very remote place, you can be armed and you've got all your stuff stockpiled, so you can survive fallout better because your house is intact. When you're in a house, you want to be ideally ground floor or basement in the very middle. A word of caution: if you are in a basement and the house collapses on top of you, you could suffocate or starve to death in the basement because you wouldn't be able to get out because everything's collapsed on top of you. Now, there's one thing that would massively assist you that most people won't have access to. If you're particularly worried about nuclear war, it's one of these. A dosimeter or a Geiger counter. It measures radiation. This one was sent to me by Ziggy Jinx, so a big thank you to him. I did do a video where I talked about this in more details if you're interested in this. But basically, this I'll put it back into the measuring mode. It measures your exposed dose to radiation, and this would be, a lifesaver in a nuclear environment. So let's say the bombs have gone off, the fallout's come down, and you're in your house. If you're in your safe room and you're getting a very low reading like this, that's good, you can stay there. However, if you're in your safe room and suddenly you start getting a reading like this, you need to move. If you don't have a Geiger counter, radiation is invisible, odourless, tasteless. You won't know it's there. Unless you can see all the dust coming in, you won't know it's there. So, what we can see from this is, oh, no, that room's not safe. But go back to, the searching, and we know if we've gone into another room and it's like that. Or you could potentially go outside your house with this, check what the radiation levels are. You could put this against food, if there's food, to check if it's safe or not. A Geiger counter in the event of nuclear war, or a dosimeter, is invaluable because it will actually, give you a good reading over what you need. But, as said, most people wouldn't have them, and that's where the danger lies, because radiation is an invisible killer. If there's fallout dust everywhere, and they don't know they're interacting with it, that's dangerous. As said, a mask is great, because a mask will prevent you inhaling the majority of the alpha radiation. Your survival odds just go up so quickly with a gas mask, it's ridiculous. Sorry, just clear my throat again, my cold's still not fully gone. So to survive a nuclear war, here's what you need to have. If you don't have a full-on gas mask, at least get yourself some sort of P2 or P3 rated spray painter's mask, something like that. Don't go for just a little dust mask, I wouldn't really trust them. When I've used dust masks before, air can get around them, because air will follow the path of least resistance, and these aren't held onto your face, with lots of straps. They normally just have like an elastic band around them. So what will happen is, rather than going through the material of the mask to act as a filter, they end up going around because there's a gap. So you want a full-on painter decorator half-face mask, or a full-on gas mask. Ideally a P3 filter, because that gives you the best protection. That prevents radiation getting to you, at least inhaling it. You need to make sure your food and drink is safe, ideally bottled and canned stuff. As said, you need to be in the middle of nowhere ideally, so you're not a nuclear target, and there's less people around to come looking for food, from you. And ideally armed, because some of the people who might come aren't going to be the friendliest people, and you might need to shoot first, or at least return fire, if they've got firearms of their own, clubs, whatever else. So, that's the grim reality of nuclear war. As said, please watch Fred's or the War Games if you haven't seen them, or the War Game, whatever it's called. It's not the 1980s film about, whoever wins, we lose. No, it's Alien vs Predator, isn't it? It's the winning move is not to play, isn't it? That War Game film, I think. But no, it's the 1965 BBC sort of War Game one, where they banned it from being shown, where the soldiers are barbecuing people over a big girder to dispose of the bodies, and they're shooting people who won't help dispose of the bodies. That one, pretty grim film, but I think you should watch it. So do some research on what actual government policies were during the Cold War, because I doubt they've changed all that much. The general idea is, in the event of a big war, when there's not a central government left, you go to regional governments, made up of councils, military commanders, that sort of thing, and they impose martial law, then they get you to essentially work as serfs. On a collective type farm, collective industry, to keep the country going, probably to eventually attack some power again later on. If you want to see it as a comedy film, watch Doctor Strangelove, that's very good. But as actual military stuff, watch either The War Game or Fred's. American The Day After is a bit watered down, but it's still the same sort of thing. You basically, as said, want to be, as much as you want to survive the initial blasts, you need to be aware that just as dangerous as all the radiation is the looters and the conscripts who are going to come and probably get you afterwards as well, because you're not fitting in with what they want. So that's my grim reality view of it. As I said, with somewhere like North Korea at the moment, I don't think you need to be too worried, as long as you're not somewhere that's directly hit by one of their dodgy ICBMs with probably a low-yield nuclear device on it. Stuff wouldn't change all that much as long as you're not where the bomb goes off. It's more for a global nuclear exchange, sort of in the style of the Cold War, that you'd have to be very worried about what's going to happen. But as I said, watch Fred's, watch the war game and form your own opinion. Maybe do some reading of these documents if you can find them, about what your government would do to you if they got the chance.